is a server action in Next.js app router? Server actions are async functions marked with use server directive that run on the server but can be called directly from client components like regular functions, eliminating the need for separate API routes for many use cases. They provide a seamless way to mutate data, handle form submissions, or perform server-side operations with automatic serialization and progressive enhancement for forms that work without JavaScript. Server actions can be defined inline in server components or in separate files, support TypeScript for type-safe server functions, and integrate with React's useFormStatus and useFormState hooks for optimistic updates and pending states. What is a key difference between Next.js and Create React App? Next.js is a framework built on top of React that provides server-side rendering, static site generation, file-based routing, API routes, and built-in optimizations, while Create React App is just a build tool that creates a client-side React application without these features. Next.js applications are production-ready with better SEO, faster initial page loads through pre-rendering, and full-stack capabilities, whereas CRA requires additional libraries and configuration for routing and data fetching. How do you manage metadata and SEO in Next.js Pages Router versus App Router? In Pages Router, you use the head component from Next.head to add meta tags, title, and other head elements per page, and you can use it in multiple components where the last rendered value takes precedence. In App Router, you export a metadata object or generate metadata function from page.js or layout.js files, which provides type-safe metadata that Next.js automatically merges and optimizes. App Router's approach is more powerful with support for dynamic metadata, automatic open graph and Twitter card generation, and better type safety, while Pages Router's head component is simpler but requires manual management. Both approaches ensure proper SEO with customizable title, description, keywords, open graph tags, canonical URLs, and structured data. When is Get Server-Side Props called in Next.js? Get server-side props runs on the server for every request to fetch data before rendering the page, ensuring users always see the most current data but requiring server processing time for each visit. This function never runs in the browser, receives request context like params and query strings, and can access databases or APIs that require server-side credentials. Use Get Server-Side Props when data must be fresh on every request or depends on user-specific information like authentication. Can you use different rendering methods for different pages in the same Next.js application? Next.js allows hybrid rendering where each page can independently choose the best rendering strategy by exporting Get Static Props for SSG, Get Server-Side Props for SSR, or neither for CSR, mixing strategies based on each page's requirements. This flexibility lets you use SSG for your marketing pages and blog for maximum speed, SSR for user dashboards with personalized data, and CSR for highly interactive admin panels, all in the same application. This per-page optimization is a key advantage of Next.js over traditional single-strategy frameworks. What is the default component type in the App Router? In the App Router, all components are React Server components by default, meaning they render on the server and their code is never sent to the client, reducing bundle size and enabling direct database access. Server components can async fetch data, access backend resources directly, keep sensitive information like API keys secure on the server, and automatically deduplicate requests. To use client-side features like hooks, event handlers, or browser APIs, you must explicitly mark components with the Use Client directive at the top of the file. How do you mark a component as a client component in the App Router? You mark a component as a client component by adding the Use Client string directive at the very top of the file before any imports, which tells Next.js that this component and its children should hydrate on the client and have access to browser APIs, hooks, and interactivity. Client components are necessary for use state, use effect, event handlers, browser-only APIs, or third-party libraries that rely on client-side features. The directive creates a boundary, and any components imported into a client component become client components too, so use it strategically at the component tree level where interactivity begins. What do prefixed folders like at Team and at Analytics represent in AppRouter? Folders prefixed with define parallel routes called slots that can render simultaneously in the same layout as separate named children props, enabling complex UI patterns like dashboards with multiple independent sections. A layout can receive multiple slot props like children, team, and analytics and render them in different positions, each with their own loading and error states that are isolated from others. Parallel routes enable conditionally rendering slots based on state, independently loading different sections, and creating modals or split views by intercepting routes into slots. When should you use client components versus server components, and what are the restrictions of each? Use server components as the default for most components, especially those that fetch data, display static content, or don't require interactivity, keeping them on the server to reduce bundle size and improve performance. Use client components when you need use state, use effect, event handlers, browser APIs like local storage or window, interactive features, or third-party libraries that depend on React hooks or browser environment. Server components cannot use hooks, handle events, access browser APIs, or use client-side only libraries, but can directly access databases and server resources, while client components can't directly access server-side resources and must fetch data through API routes or server actions. You can compose them by importing server components into client components as children props rather than direct imports, maintaining the server-only code in server components while adding interactivity at the edges with client components for optimal performance. How do you pass JSON request bodies in Next.js API routes? Next.js automatically passes request bodies in API routes when the content type header is application, JSON, making rec body available as a JavaScript object without additional configuration. For other content types like application, XWWW form encoded or multipart form data, you may need additional parsing or libraries. In AppRouter route handlers, you use the request object with methods like await request. JSON for JSON bodies or await request. Form data for form submissions following Web API standards.